Look, you wake up early, maybe even before your alarm goes off. You check your phone, glance at your bank account, and it's not empty. But it's not where you thought it would be either. You go to work, you do what you're supposed to do, you earn your paycheck, and at the end of the month, you save something. Not a lot, but something. And somehow, it still doesn't feel like progress. Here's the thing. You're not reckless. You're not wasting money like crazy. You're actually trying. And yet, there's this quiet frustration in the back of your mind that keeps asking the same question. Why does it feel like I'm running, but not getting anywhere? Now, you might be thinking, maybe you just need more time. Maybe this is just how it works. But what if that's not entirely true? What if you're doing everything right and still stuck in a system that only rewards a different kind of behavior? My name is Demas, and I spend way too much time thinking about money. If you're someone who feels stuck financially, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Look, this isn't going to be one of those videos that just tells you to work harder or save more, and magically everything will be fine. Because deep down, you already know that's not the full picture. You've been doing that. You've been responsible. And yet, something still feels off. Here's the thing. This video is about clarity. Not motivation, not hype. Clarity. I want to show you where you actually stand financially using real data, real numbers, and real logic. And more importantly, I want to explain why even if you're doing better than most people, it still might not feel like enough. Because once you see the gap clearly, you stop guessing and start making better decisions. Here's the thing. Most financial advice sounds simple for a reason. Save more money. Invest early. Avoid debt. You've probably heard these 100 times. And look, none of that is wrong. In fact, it's a good starting point. But a starting point is not the same as a complete strategy. Because here's what most people don't realize. This advice assumes your situation is already stable, predictable, and optimized. It doesn't account for rising living costs, stagnant wages, or the reality that saving 10% of a small income doesn't move the needle very far. Now, you might be thinking, but isn't consistency the key? Yes, but consistency without direction can keep you stuck longer than you think. If you're consistently doing something that has a low impact, you're just slowly reinforcing the same outcome. And this is where people get frustrated. They're disciplined, they're responsible, but they're applying effort in a system that rewards scale, not just discipline. Now let's ground this in reality, because feelings can be misleading, but numbers usually aren't. According to data from the Federal Reserve, the median savings balance in the U.S. is only around a few $1,000s, and when you look at net worth, it's not as high as most people assume. For Americans under 35, the median net worth sits somewhere around $30,000 to $40,000. Even for those in their late 30s to early 40s, it's just over 6 figures. Now pause for a second and think about that. If you have a steady job, a few thousand saved, and you're not drowning in high-interest debt, there's a very real chance you're already in the top half financially. This is where it gets really interesting. Because if being above average still feels like you're barely moving forward, then maybe the benchmark itself isn't that meaningful. Maybe the problem isn't just where you stand, but how slow the overall system moves. Look, progress is a tricky thing, because most of the time we don't measure it with numbers. We measure it with feelings. If your income goes up a little, you feel like you're improving. If you manage to save at the end of the month, you feel responsible. And compared to your past self, that might be true. But here's what most people don't realize. Financial progress isn't about feeling better. It's about moving faster than the forces working against you. Inflation, rising costs, lifestyle creep, these don't care how disciplined you are. They just keep moving. So you end up in this strange position where everything feels okay, but nothing feels like real progress. It's like running on a treadmill. You're putting in effort, you're sweating, your heart rate is up, but if the speed isn't high enough, you're not actually going anywhere meaningful. And that's the illusion. You're active but not advancing. Now let's strip away the feeling and just look at the math. Say you earn $60,000 a year. You're disciplined, so you save 10% of that. That's $6,000 annually. You invest it consistently and earn an average return of 7% per year, which is actually pretty reasonable over the long term. On paper, that sounds solid. But here's what most people don't realize. After 10 years, you'd end up with roughly $80,000 to $85,000. That's not nothing, but it's also not life-changing. Stretch that out to 20 years, and you're somewhere in the $250,000 range. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's just how investing works. Yes, but here's the problem. If your goal is financial freedom or even just real flexibility in your life, that pace is slow, really slow, because the math isn't broken. It's just limited. And if you don't change the inputs, the outcome doesn't change either. Here's the thing. Most people think they're playing one financial game, but in reality, there are two happening at the same time. The first is the saving game. This is where you budget, cut expenses, and try to keep more of what you earn. It's the one everyone talks about. And yes, it matters. But here's what most people don't realize. This game has a ceiling. You can only cut so much. There's a limit to how frugal you can be before it starts affecting your quality of life. Then there's the second game, the income growth game. This is where things start to shift. Instead of asking, how do I spend less? You start asking, how do I earn more? Or even better, how do I earn differently? Now you might be thinking, isn't that harder? Of course it is. But it's also where the real leverage is. Because when your income grows, your ability to save, invest, and build wealth grows with it. Now let's talk about what's really driving your decisions. Because money isn't just math, it's behavior. Here's the thing. Even if you understand everything we've talked about so far, your brain can still work against you. Take loss aversion, for example. People feel the pain of losing money more strongly than the pleasure of gaining it. So instead of investing, they keep their money in cash because it feels safer. But what they don't see is the silent loss happening through inflation every single year. Then there's instant gratification. You work hard, so when you finally have extra money, spending it feels justified. And individually, those decisions don't seem like a big deal, but over time, they compound in the wrong direction. Now, you might be thinking, I just don't want to take big risks. And that's fair. But here's what most people don't realize. Avoiding risk is still a decision. It just shifts the risk somewhere else, usually into missed opportunities. This is where it gets really interesting. Let's compare two people. Same starting point, same income, same opportunities. Person A saves $500 a month and keeps things steady. No big changes, no major risks, just consistency. Person B also starts at $500, but focuses on growing income over time. Maybe they switch jobs, learn new skills, or build a side income. Each year, they increase how much they can invest. Fast forward 20 years, Person A ends up with a decent amount. But Person B, they're in a completely different position. Here's what most people don't realize. Wealth isn't just built on discipline, it's built on expansion. Now, let's connect this to a common question. Should you invest or pay off debt? Look, if your debt has high interest, the answer is simple. Pay it off. But if it's lower, the real question becomes behavioral, because the best strategy only works if you can actually stick to it consistently. So where does this leave you? Look, this isn't about completely changing your life overnight. It's about making smarter moves consistently. First, increase your savings rate, but don't stop there. Saving more helps, but it's not the full solution. The real shift happens when you focus on growing your income. Even a small increase can create a much bigger gap over time. Second, automate your investing. Take emotion out of the equation. Set it up so money gets invested before you even have the chance to spend it. Third, be intentional with your lifestyle. You don't have to deprive yourself, but you do need to make sure your expenses aren't growing faster than your progress. Here's the thing. Being in the top 50% isn't the goal. Because average progress still feels slow. The goal is momentum. And once you start building that, everything begins to change.